All right, we are back with the first Astro Weather of the week and of the year, actually. And look who's here with me. That's right. It's little Miss Peachy getting her morning pets on. Yeah, she said she would make a cameo appearance on today's show. So I obliged. How the heck is everybody? And if you weren't around on Sunday night, I wish you all a happy Gregorian New Year and all of its potential. Boy, we got it kicked off with this whole Venezuela thing, didn't we? You know, I've heard that there was a deal in place with Maduro and that he had actually surrendered 2 weeks ago. This is what I've heard. We live in the fog of reality, whatever that is. And oh, look at that. We got some deer in the backyard. See that, Peaches? There's a big deer. Yeah. And apparently this was kind of all show. The Maduro was already out and gone, some kind of body double or stand-in. You know, the world is an illusion. It's an illusion, of course, until the IRS sends you a letter. And even that's kind of an illusion as well. So anyway, we're going to get into some of that over on 15 Minutes of Flame today. There's a link, by the way, in the show notes. So if you want to join us over there, we're going to be on for about an hour. And I'm going to be talking about spheres of influence, which is a theory that's being promulgated. I don't want to share too much because I don't want to give the entire show away. But it's a theory that's being promulgated that the three main powers, China, Russia, and the U.S., have a secret agreement to slice up the world. Oh. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about that over on 15 Minutes. And I invite you to come if that sounds interesting to you. Join us. Let's see, who do we have here today? It's always a great start to my day to go into Chattaria and say howdy. We got the California Contrarian, Josie's Jazzy Junk, Jackie Delario, Diane Evans. There's Robert Phoenix. The new next pod. What's happening? Let's see. Christine Mose. Christine, I'm going to send you. I got to get in touch with you, Christine. It's nothing urgent, but I want to get in touch with you. Lena Winkler. What's going on, Lena? Ole Kobe. Howdy, howdy. There she is, lovely and talented one. Susan Sharp. Hi, Susan. Janine's here. Hi, Janine. Green-Eyed Crow. Good to see Green-Eyed Crow. Barbara Boots. Yeah, I don't know what happened in the comments. I guess when the show starts, there's a new set of comments. Maya Rose. There's Steve. What's up, brother Steve? Thor by the door. Road Trip 1981. Hi, darling. Great to see you. That's what I heard too. It's amazing how, 10 years ago, the conspiratorial theories were kind of slow, right? I mean, it was sort of like, having one of these icebreaker ships, in the North Pole, right? Or in the Bering Strait, where they have, ice caps, right? You have these icebreakers that go in and, if things get, too frozen, literally the ship's role is to break the ice so that another ship behind it can come through, right? And that's what it was like having to parse through information and kind of find things 10 years ago. That's not the case anymore. Now it's the ice sheet is broken, and we have a Bering Strait to the sea of information. However, it's not always information that you can depend upon. Case in point, this Nick Shirley thing with the Somalis. Now, we know that there's a there, which this is a really interesting sort of iteration on what I would call the mind war. Okay. Instead of having something that is drummed up and is a psyop and a false flag, which people can sniff out now a mile away. Like, how much penetration did that whole Bondi Beach thing make? Zero. There was no penetration. So they take something that's real, right, that they've been sitting on for a while, and then they, quote unquote, uncover it, and then they give it to the masses. So it feels like it's real. Oh, look at this. Isn't this terrible? And it's all bread and circus. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, these things now that, like, they have almost socially engineered society to give people conspiracies, or because you could say, like, a conspiracy is anything that's hidden, and it is something that's hidden, that's shared between two or more people. That's a conspiracy. When you look up the definition of conspiracy, that's what you'll find. And it's almost like, well, we'll give them their conspiracies. We'll give them something to gnaw on, to it's like the hard jerky, right? We'll give them something to gnaw on, so it feels like that there is some degree of progress in the world. Like, oh, we're getting to the core of corruption, when in actuality, everything they've already needed from that operation has been literally extracted. There's probably not much left on the bone, right? Especially after, Doge went through and they found everything, and they probably knew about it anyway, way before that. And so they give it to us, right? They give it to us. And all of a sudden, Nick Shirley becomes this internet sensation, kind of gives the other Nick Fuentes a bit of a run for his money for screen time. Nick Shirley is kind of an avowed Zionist. He's been to Israel, right? So this is all part of the mind war. And when we have an event like what happened in Venezuela, we really don't know. We really don't know whether it was an arranged deal, whether he was in Gitmo, whether he's in Syria. And it's kind of like what happened with Osama bin Laden in the whole SEAL Team 6 thing. Like, I remember when that happened, I just thought, this stinks like, week old fish. I mean, that's what it smelled like. Like, it just made no sense. I looked at the pictures. I said, that's not fucking Osama bin Laden. And, and I'd heard that many of us in this world who were paying attention had heard that Osama bin Laden had died of kidney failure because he couldn't get to his dialysis. He was on the way to Tora Bora to get dialysis, and he died along the way. And then they had this other guy stand in for him to play the role of the Mandarin. And this is what these global figures are, who are quote unquote bad guys. They're Mandarins. If you don't know what I'm referring to, if you saw, I think it was Iron Man 2, where they have this villain who's the Mandarin, and he's kind of Asian and evil, and he takes over like the television system and broadcasts these malevolent plans that he's about to unleash on the world. And it turns out that the Mandarin is an old drunk. He's an old drunken actor played by Ben Kingsley. That's the character. I mean, Ben Kingsley's the actor. He's not Ben Kingsley playing the Mandarin in the plot of the movie. He's just the actor, right? But that's what I mean by a Mandarin. Like these these global leaders aren't really who they say they are, or who we make them out to be, and they did they put in a great deal of effort over the last couple months to paint Maduro as this bad guy, and he's doing this, he's doing that, and he's the godfather of fentanyl, which he wasn't, and therefore we have to go out and bomb these boats, that are in the Caribbean, and they didn't even know. In fact, they even admitted to the fact that they got a couple of random fishing boats. I'm assuming it's more than a couple, right? But what they're doing is they are sort of tenderizing the public. So when you see something like that happen, that something's going to go down in that area, in that region. Anyway, now it just comes back to the fact that all of this information is on the surface, and it's very easy to find because people are turned on and attuned to it. So that says a lot about where we are, where we've come from, which I think is good. But on the other hand, people can be really misled, and we live in the time of AI. And there can be so many versions of counterfeit reality with AI. So anyway, I'm going to get into some of that over on 15 minutes. But Venus Sun conjunct day, that's right. We got a lot of Capricorn. Well, why don't we use that as a cue to segue into the weather? Ratchet Boo, Esperanza, Liddy Lou, greetings to you. Osama bin Laden had pictures of Avril Lavigne on his computer. If that was Osama bin Laden, even there are people that think that even Avril Lavigne is an Avril Lavigne. Let's see, Scrubbies. What's happening, Tamara? Good to see you. Let's see. Did I miss anybody? Sandra Wells. Hey, we got a Sandra Wells sign. What up, cuz? How the heck are you? Tara Jetson. Soul Traveler. All right. We got a good house here today. Sweet Woodruff checking in from Plano. What's going on, Sweet Woodruff? We got Blunt Hair Talk. How about that? Got a gent sighting. All right. Let's get into the weather. Let's do that. Since people clamor for when is he going to get to it? When is he going to talk about it? He spends too much time talking to the chat. Let me burn this. He spends too much time talking to the chat. And I'm not in chat. Well, come join us. We got a great group. We got a groovy bunch. Okay, here we go. You came for the weather you get. Speaking of weather, we have had an incredibly dry winter. Really dry. And we've got some high winds coming in on the weekend, and that's always a recipe for disaster. All right, here we go. Let me blow this up a little bit more. Here we go. The aforementioned Sun-Venus conjunction, Venus being blotted out by the sun. They call that Kazemi. So the idea here is that these two celestial bodies being so close to one another blot out one another's existence. It's kind of like a codependent relationship. When people are so close and in their strangulated bubble that they blot out one another. That's a pretty good image for, you can't see things as they are. Now, that said, I also feel there's another interpretation of Kazemi, which is depending on the planet, right? And look at that. We got Mercury there too, Mars. We got Venus, Mars, Mercury, all Kazimi'd out. Look at that. Look at that. That's a big fucking deal, right? And Mars is out in front, so Mars is the chariot, but slightly just out in front. It's interesting, especially for those of you that are in the corporate environment. I was just going to talk about Sun, Venus. Let me talk about that, and then we're going to bring Mars back into it, and then we'll bring all three of these aspects together, sort of the menage a trois of the goat, right? So one of the things that happens with Cazimi, or of this Venus-Sun conjunction, we'll just go there for a second, is that there is an identification or an over-identification with your relationship to a certain thing. It could be a relationship in general, or relating to the certain thing that the relationship is based upon. So for instance, with Capricorn, it would be your relationship with corporate structures, your relationship with hierarchy, your relationship with your father, right? Because Capricorn is, the ultimate father time, which waits for no one. So we're looking at who we are in relationship to those things. And we're trying to sort that out. What's mine and what belongs to this other entity? This is another interpretation of the Sun-Venus conjunction. Now, the relationship is occulted because it's behind the sun, right? So it takes some willingness and some effort and some presence of mind to kind of go there. What is my relationship to X? Does it serve me? And we have a T-square happening right now, which is heating up, right? You can see Chiron at 22. Why don't we just talk about that? We'll split this T-square in half. So with Chiron at 22 Aries, what we're looking at here is it's about power plays and vulnerability. Power plays and vulnerability. And, there's something about Venus in Capricorn that is kind of interesting, right? And even though I believe it's in its detriment, it's in its fall. Venus and Capricorn is in its fall. But there's something enduring about Venus and Capricorn, through thick or thin, through good times and bad, like Venus and Capricorn's there. It's steady as she goes. But there's also a sense of needing to perform at a higher level with Venus and Capricorn. So it's not without certain expectations. And some of the most, I think, enduring relationships can be forged under a Venus and Capricorn transit. They may not be sexy. They may not, give you a rush of pheromones, but they can really perform a very useful function. And so this is kind of another part of this dialogue. It's like we're looking at our relationships. Now, if you have performed that role for other people, if you've been the steady Betty or the steady Eddie, right, you have to look at that and say, okay, well, what am I getting out of this? With Mars in front, also, it's like, well, where is this going? Remember, Mars is the chariot, and right now it's out in front. It's the lead dog. Where is this all going? And Chiron comes in and it kind of cleaves everything, right? And Chiron in Aries is the individual. Well, what's in it for me? So you could look at this from any level. You could look at this from longstanding relationships that you've invested in, time and effort, Capricorn, and your relationship to hierarchy, corporate structures, and quote unquote leaders. So Chiron comes in and says, Is this worth it? Are you bleeding out? It's not really a time for business as usual. And if we go to the other side, right, here's Jupiter over here in Cancer, in retrograde. And Jupiter is always about kind of more promise. Well, what about over here? Is this better? Is this opportunity or this position or this affiliation going to be better? And I think today's one of those days where people may have second thoughts or doubts about, since the year is really early, second thoughts or doubts about their direction. And my sense is that people want something simpler. Because when you get into all of these Capricornian dynamics, especially Juno's there now as well, right? You kind of look at the complexity, and you can. There's a lot of nostalgia, kind of on the other side of the chart, right? Oh yeah, those were simpler times. Oh yeah, it was nice when the office only had 12 people versus 24, right? I mean, there's that kind of vibe in the air, and there's a longing, kind of on the other side of everything. Jupiter's out there, retrograding, looking to the past. And Chiron is squaring Jupiter, which makes it even more dramatic. And you're kind of yearning for, Aries is all about vitalization. And this also gets into aging. So if you're, I would say, 55 and over, this T square is meaningful for you. Because number one, you're looking backwards a bit more. When you hit 60, you begin to look backwards even more, trust me. And when you're past 60, this idea of vitalization becomes a really big theme, right? So this is another factor here. Like, what am I spending my life force doing? Is what I'm doing, who I'm doing it with, is it supporting me? Is that to quote the famous Peggy Lee? Is that all there is? Right? Do you remember that song? Is that all there is? Is that all there is, my friend? Then let's keep drinking. Let's break out the band and play a tune. Remember that song? I remember hearing that song as a kid on AM radio. It made me fucking sad. Is that all there is to a circus? Anyway, some of you know what I'm talking about. See, I'm already in the Jupiter retrograde with Cancer, taking me back in time to drunken Peggy Lee. Anyway, this is a big theme today. Big theme. Who am I? Where am I going? Who am I doing it with? Is it draining me? Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could just kind of go back to a simpler time? Now, I'm gonna say, well, that's just grandiose and nostalgic thinking. Not even grandiose. That it would be more kind of illusory and nostalgic thinking. But I'm going to share with you here that even though Jupiter is moving backwards, it is trining Saturn and Neptune. So there's a bit of a there, right? And what we're seeing with Jupiter is with the retrograde, like it's going to go back to 14 degrees. And it's going to feel as if the past is over, right? It's kind of like the past is going to recede. Look, it sounds like a cliche, and of course the past recedes into memory, but there's a kind of a bigger picture of that, where it's like everybody has their own individual relationship with it, but when we experience it as a group, it's like, oh, we're not going back. Right? We're not going back. So with this Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune trine, there is an opportunity. It's sort of like going into your house and getting as many things as possible before it burns to the ground. That's what it feels like. So there's a sense here of collecting what's important and getting rid of, because this is a retrograde, and getting rid of what's not, right? Would you rather have 4 or 5 or 6 than 200 maybe not so meaningful things? I mean, I was sitting in my living room last night, and the way I have it set up is I have my couch, of course, the big screen, and then I have a sort of a what you call it, setup of shelves. And on those shelves are a myriad of pictures that my mother inherited from my grandmother when my grandmother passed away. A myriad of pictures, and pictures that, and I got it. It's not in that room. It's in where my mother used to sleep. But I've got a picture of my grandfather taking his first Holy Communion. It's kind of a beautiful picture, right? It's black and white. There's kind of the shaft of light. It's not staged. It's not a studio thing. It's whatever they were able to put together in the church, right? But what do I do with these things? I was thinking about it, right? Here's my grandmother. There's my great grandmother with my father. There's my mother. There's my father. Like, what do I do with this stuff? And it dawned on me, like, at some point, because my kid is not going to take all these pictures. It would be nice, right? I mean, it would be beautiful that these pictures would travel with him, and the memory of these people would say, he doesn't even know most of these people. Right? He doesn't know most of them. So why would he have any investment in preserving his ancestral, the records of his ancestry? He wouldn't. So I'm like, man, these pictures are just going to wind up in landfill one of these days. And it was a really sad thought. I swear to God, there's a business model out there where somebody can take pictures. I'm sure it already exists. And you could turn those pictures into AI. And those people become sort of reanimated. I know it's creepy, but it's a way to save the pictures. And then you have them kind of a living hall of memory, or it's sort of like creating something like that. So my kid and my kid's kid, who, if that ever happens, and if I ever see it, can go into that hall of memory and meet the ancestral line. And that those pictures could be the foundation of that. And that as long as we're online, they live forever, right? And if we're not, then, to quote Peggy Lee, is that all there is? So this is a good time to figure out what it is you want to take with you, what it is that's essential. Apart from all the other stuff, like this is also, we're coming up. Look, spring is going to be here fast, and people are going to want to clean out their closets and clean shit out. And it's normally Aries brings us that. So you may want to start thinking about, what are you going to do with those things? Certainly I did. And the outcome was not pleasant. It's like it all, in a weird way, it all kind of stops with me. I don't have any brothers. I don't have any sisters. I can't say to my younger sister of 6 years, hey, have some of these pictures, right? And offload the responsibility onto her, just like it falls on my shoulders. So there's a lot going on with time today as well. And you get kind of caught up with this Jupiter opposition. And these planets are coming forward. And so there's more opposition with Jupiter coming. And it's a longing for a different time. Remember, Cancer is the past. And Saturn, for all of its warts, mediates the past and the future. Because that's where Saturn sits in our solar system. It looks backwards to the sun and the moon, in this case. And it looks forward to Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and the exoplanets. So Saturn is the mediator of time. And we're in the second decan of Saturn, or Capricorn, which puts us in the Tauran decan. Of course, I've just been talking about physical objects, material objects, which is very Tauran, right? So there's that. We have Chiron. The moon is in Leo today. So that's also sort of drumming up these familial kind of nostalgic, because, you know, Leo's connected to childhood. It's connected to children. There is a sentimental quality between Cancer and Leo. It exists, but it exists differently, right? Leo's, with Cancer, we have like emotion and sentimentality. Leo distills that and turns it into the heart. And heart and emotion aren't always the same thing. Sometimes they're not always in alignment, right? If we need to sever the past, we cling to the past because a lot of people are scared of change. But with the Leo, or just the heart in general, there's the courage to make those changes and to step out of the past and to follow one's heart. It's very, they're connected, but they're different, right? Now, by the time the moon gets into Virgo, we are not in nostalgia land. The moon in Virgo is very critical. And it's like, you know, what the hell are you going on about? What are you crying about? Just make those changes. Make your bed while you're at it. And by the way, you need to lose 10 to 15 pounds. I mean, that's the moon in Virgo. I have great empathy for people that have moon in Virgo in their charts. Both my parents had moon in Virgo. I did not grow up in moon in Virgo. I grew up in moon in Libra. Very different. But my mother was born on a full moon in Virgo. My father was born on a new moon in Virgo. Even though he was a Leo, still pretty new, right? So I grew up with two parents who had Virgo moons, and I swear to God, they bonded around those moons. And they would do this all the time. They would make friends with people. And I was always happy when they made friends. Oh, new people in our life. Well, this could be interesting. Who you got? Right? Sometimes I liked them. Sometimes I didn't like them. But I was always in favor of them having friends. And they would have these friends, and slowly together they would chip away at their imperfections. And eventually they'd get rid of their friends. They, oh, we're not talking to them anymore. And I could see it. It was like clockwork, you know, sort of the little gossip and the bad mouthing would start to happen. And eventually they'd agree upon it. Yeah, we got to get rid of these people. Well, they didn't seem that bad to me. I saw this quite a bit. So it was this Virgoan conspiracy that they shared between one another. Well, that's a rough moon, Virgo moon. I lived with it. And it's the mothers in their charts. Both of their mothers were fucking merciless. Just merciless. My grandmother didn't tell my father she loved him until she was on her fucking deathbed. And this was a guy who did a crazy amount of things for her. Crazy amount. And on my mother's side, her mother was just, she was a hard woman. Your mother of 5. Oof. Cancer. She was a crabby Cancer. Nobody was ever good enough. right? With being the crabby, she was unhappy. That's what my mother grew up with. My mother grew up with being a second mother in that household, having to take care of the kids, being the oldest, right? Moon in Virgo, uber responsible. So anyway, you got a moon in Virgo. I have empathy. So as the moon moves into Virgo, it is going to bring some interesting energy to the Capricornian orgy we have going on over here in the 12th house. And it makes changes, I think, easier. Because we'll get into a sextile with the moon in Cancer as well. Of course, the Cancer being the rulership of the moon, which could, makes changes easier. And moon in Virgo is like, no, just get rid of it. Do something different. I think it's a good energy to start the new year off on. And if you have a lot of things to get done, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow, or get organized with, then the moon in Virgo is going to be your friend. If not, then it can lead to kind of a paralysis by neuroses. Speaking of which, we have an inconjunct with Saturn, Neptune. And it's an interesting inconjunct. Because when I look at the moon in Leo, I hear Joseph Campbell's famous sentence in my brain: follow your bliss. And a lot of people misunderstood that. A lot of people, especially in Marin County, they interpreted bliss in a very different, very personal kind of way, if you know what I mean. Kind of a hedonistic interpretation of bliss, right? And that's not really what he meant. He meant that if there was something that gave you great joy in the doing of it, that's the thing that you should follow. And there's a difference between something that you invest time and effort and energy into versus immediate gratification. And that's what Campbell was talking about. Well, today is kind of like that, right? With the inconjunct to Saturn, Neptune, and we're in the moon in Leo, which is the heart. This adds another dimension to what's going on over here, down here, and over here, right? So what is it? What is it? What is your bliss? Because Saturn, Neptune are like, hey, listen. It's the voice in your head. You're not really doing the right thing. You're not, remember us, right? And Saturn is the kind of the dutiful mechanism or operation of getting things done. Take away the sign that it's in. That's just what it is. Neptune is the dream. Right? Neptune is the dream. And it's like this inconjunct early in the day here. Because by the time we move into the afternoon and evening, right, it's going to start to move more. It'll eventually move into opposition. And then when the moon is in Virgo opposing Saturn, Neptune, it's a much harder kind of look. Am I doing what I'm doing just to make a living? Which God am I serving? And this is a really challenging dialogue or monologue to have with yourself, or if you're working with other people, to have. Because there was a time where if we wanted to change course and direction in our lives, we could do it. We could do it. We could say, oh, I want to go do a different job, or I want to get trained for different work. But now it's much harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder because the cost of living is higher. I mean, it cannot be denied. You can say, well, wages were requisite with the cost of living. Yeah, there's some truth to that. But there was a time where a man in this country, use the word man here, a man in this country could support their family on a McJob. And the mother or wife could stay at home and raise the children. I mean, you'd have to go back to the early 60s or mid 60s, but it was doable. Now you've got both parents working. Some parents are working 2 jobs. Both parents might be working 2 jobs, taking tag teams on shifts. This is what I'm talking about. It was easier to look at your life and say, I'd really like to be a glassblower. Now, I know it's a radical kind of shift, but it's an interesting hobby, glassblowing. Not everybody's a glassblower. Anyway, but that's what this in conjunct is. There's a lot of soul searching today. A lot of soul, and I think it's good. I think it's healthy. We're in also a Moon Uranus square. So, I guarantee you, it may not be anybody in chat, but it could be. I guarantee you, somebody today is going to walk out on their job, and they're going to say, "Fuck it. I'll live with the consequences. The consequences are better than this." Now, there are others where, corporate might make that decision. You may be facing the Moon in Virgo, opposing Saturn, Neptune. What am I doing? What am I going to do? How am I going to make my way in the world? And these are all, I would say, vital concerns. But here we are. What is your bliss? What is your bliss, and how do you carry it out? And one of the things with the Moon in Virgo, and we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, it'll really help with this stellium in Capricorn. And if you remain, one of the things about Virgos is that they're they, present company included, on the surface, they can be very calm and composed. But underneath the surface, that's not always the case. I mean, Virgo is very mercurial. But Virgo does have that ability to be cool, logical, tactical. So when the moon is in Virgo, which isn't a great position for it, but it's in trining the Capricornian planets, you can logically kind of assess where you are, and you can make changes. You can make fundamental changes. Anyway, I think that's about it. We covered a lot of territory, didn't we? Including some disclosure about my personal life. Okay, let's get into the star of the day. Feels like a good time. We got 17 minutes left in the stream. So let's do this. Let's get to the banner. All right. Today's True Hemp Science star of the day is, where is it? I just had it up here. Oh, hold on. I've got it better. Let's do this. Here we go. Come back. Come back, Johnny. Today's True Hemp Science star of the day is John DeLorean. So before I get into John DeLorean, let me just take you to the True Hemp Science website. Chris has some new products here. Bioactive silica. Look at this. Alkalize your body, elemental repair, enhance skin, hair, nails, glow. Look at that. He's got some great reviews here. So look at this. First-time customer received 20% off your first purchase. Yeah, and then you could probably throw in 15 minutes on your exit, and you'll get the goodie bag as well when you spend $100 or more. So 20% off. Valid for 30 days. So come on in here. It's a good time to experience the healing power of CBD. And Chris has a new one here, Reposa. Pet sounds great, great, great for your animals. It is a great elixir for your animals. This is some of the best CBD you'll find anywhere. TrueHempScience.com, your one-stop shop for all things CBD. All right, let's talk John DeLorean. Interesting character. Like, just look at this chart. Look at how complex this is. Like, if this is somebody I would be doing a session for, this is a 2-hour session with this chart easily. You know, untangling the squares. A lot of squares. This is a very intense chart. So where do we start? Let me start with the ascendant. He's an Aries rising with Mars and Aries on the first house cusp. And what do we know about vehicles? They're the chariot. Mars is the chariot. And John DeLorean was a car wizard, and he's an instrumental figure in the automobile industry, particularly at GM. He's this kind of wunderkind, brilliant engineer. In fact, he was really close to getting, he already had 2 degrees. He was close to getting his law degree. So DeLorean was intellectually a pretty powerful figure, right? When he would put his mind to something, he could get things done. He's got Mercury in Sagittarius retrograde and Venus in Sagittarius. Let's go to the Mars part. Let's start with Mars. This guy thrived on challenges, and one of the quotes from his biography was that he didn't like recreational sports because he was too competitive. Like, he would have to win at all costs. That's Mars on the ascendant in Aries. He was driven. John DeLorean was driven. What's also interesting, he looks like Michael Aquino, actually, a little bit. But he had surgery. He went through a period where he decided to alter his appearance. And he had reconstructive surgery with his jaw. So I'll show you. And before I show you, to me, this is all very first house. Aries is the head, right? It's the head. And he felt like his jaw kept him from being attractive, good looking. It wasn't a fit for his kind of hard charging persona. So he went through a phase where he got worked on, and then he started to work out, and he starts to spend more and more time in Los Angeles. This is a guy that was born in Detroit. His father worked on the line, but his father was also a major alcoholic. There's the father right there. He's got a strong relationship with the father. DeLorean is part of a really big family. And he would spend time between California and Michigan. His mother would yo-yo back and forth between the two. He's got the moon in Taurus, which is great. It's exalted in the second house, accidental exaltation. And he's got that, that in conjunct with his home and a lot of movement. In California to Michigan is a 9th house operation. Anything over 450 miles, it can be interpreted as 9th housing, right? Just like the 3rd house can be within a 150-mile radius. So you could see, right, like there's this, movement back and forth. And so his mother and his father both come in and hammer his Neptune square, right? They hammer his Neptune. This is hammer his Neptune. This is a square. Father was a big-time alcoholic. and would spend their money on Friday. He and his boys from the line in Detroit would go to a bar and get drunk and get into fights, because that's how his father would work out his frustration. And DeLorean saw that his father, who didn't speak English really well, and was foreign and didn't have a great education, he had supposedly great ideas, but he never was able to put them into action because of who he was, right? Like the guys on the who would run the line, or the managers who would oversee the line, wouldn't listen to his ideas. So DeLorean saw that. And here you can see the sextile in play, right? The father is influencing the son, literally and figuratively. And with sextiles, you have to activate them. And look at where Pluto is. I mean, his fourth house is a freaking cauldron. And he's got that Mars-Pluto square. And he was driven, right? John DeLorean was driven. And he clearly did not want to suffer the same fate as his father. So he wound up putting himself ultimately in a position to succeed. And here we have the Mars-Sun square. He's a fighter. John DeLorean is a fighter, right? Everything that this guy ever got and lost, he fought for. But there's also a restlessness. Like he's at the top of his game in Michigan, doing the Detroit thing, and he decides to build this car. Let's get back to the facial reconstruction. That Ceres, so Ceres is nurturing, right? It is the planet that it's kind of a planet that represents how we nurture, where we nurture, what's important to us. For him, it's his appearance, right? And so he's going to get this reconstruction of his jaw. Let me see if I can show you before and after. Yeah. So this was the before right here. And this is the after. He's like, damn it, I'm going to have a strong jutting. But he also got more work done, you can tell. Like there's lifts. He might have had a bit of a nose job. You could kind of tell that he looks like fucking Michael Aquino here a little bit. But this is how John DeLorean ages. He becomes a bit of a womanizer and starts dating actresses. He dated Ursula Andress, and he eventually marries Christina Ferrera, who was a model and then a TV personality. She's from Italy, right? Venus and Sagittarius, ninth house. So he has a strong ninth house connection. And he goes to Ireland to start the DeLorean. And it's because of the tax stuff, right? He can theoretically make his cars cheaper there by dodging the taxes. Ireland's going, and he had British investment in the DeLorean. And that's very Jupiter ninth house, isn't it? He's got this grand trine, and DeLorean, I think he's responsible for the Camaro. Like he had a great ability to design things that were aesthetically pleasing, but also very functional. Like he was one of the top sort of designers and architects of the golden era of Detroit. And you can see where Saturn is trining Uranus and trining Pluto in his chart. He's got a grand trine there, right? And he's got two grand trines. This guy is really fucking powerful. Really powerful. And this is creative, right? This is all very creative. He was a creative person. Neptune trine Mercury, right? Neptune trine Venus, Neptune trine Chiron. It's all creative. Fifth house, Leo, true node, fifth house. And he's a romantic. John DeLorean is a romantic. But he's also a pragmatist with the sun in Capricorn, able to run a big company. And the Saturn-Uranus trine is taking things that are kind of ahead of their time and mainstreaming them. And this car, the DeLorean, is the perfect example of that because it becomes immortalized in the Back to the Future series. So he may not have created a car that, like, say, is immortal as the Mustang, right? Or even to some, well, he did do the Camaro. But those were like team creations that came through GM. This was his. So he may not have created a car that immortalized him in the sales sense, but his legacy and the car that they converted, or the vehicle they converted this into in Back to the Future, did immortalize him. He'll always be associated with those movies. And that's very Saturn. That's very Time Lord. The Uranus Sun sextile is also part of that kind of experimental, ahead of his time. John DeLorean was a man that was ahead of his time. Then he gets into trouble. He gets into financial trouble. And he goes through this trial where he's being accused of trying to do a $225 million cocaine deal. And he's acquitted. And he always pled that he was innocent. And all of a sudden his finances dry up. England, which was helping him, some of the motor companies in England were behind the DeLorean. They're into it. They're helping him finance it, and they decide they're going to pull out. So there's this idea that there's this conspiracy with DeLorean, and somebody wanted him to fail. And the automobile industry is no stranger to that. Francis Ford Coppola did a movie called The Tucker. It's a good small film. It's with Jeff Bridges and Christian Slater. And it's about this guy who creates this car that's independent from Detroit. And he's like, how can he build a better box? And there's a conspiratorial element behind it. And it's like Detroit doesn't want this car built. So they send out their henchmen to basically wreck the character, the Tucker, of that movie. They send out their henchmen to wreck his life and wreck his vehicles. And I feel like that there could be some of that going on with DeLorean, because he was vulnerable. So he goes through all of this, and he's acquitted. And then his wife, Christina Ferreira, decides that she doesn't want any part of him anymore. She stayed with him through the trial, but after the trial was over, she's like, I'm done. They had kids together. Then she winds up marrying the TV executive from ABC, because I think at that time she was on TV and doing stuff for ABC, certainly locally in LA, maybe some national stuff. It's interesting. If you have Netflix, I believe there's a quasi documentary that uses Alec Baldwin as John DeLorean. He's like a stand-in. So it mixes archival footage with fictional characters and part of the storyline. And what's interesting about Alec Baldwin is he's an Aries, and he actually really looks a lot like John DeLorean. So if you're interested in finding out more about his life, and you have Netflix, you can probably pick that up. or you're not going to pick it up. You'll just read it and watch it. Anyway, very interesting character. I could probably go on more with this chart, but he lives on, right? He doesn't have a statue dedicated to him in Detroit anywhere, but he created a chariot of time, a time chariot, and it will always be associated with him. There's your True Hemp Science Star of the Day, John DeLorean. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your presence as always. Mods, thanks for being here and doing your thing. Chattaria, have a blessed day, and hit the like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. We meet here every day at 8 a.m., and then I go over to Rumble and shoot my mouth off. All right, take care. God bless. Bye for now.